Anna in Melbourne, Australia. I think some truths only surface when you're finally steady enough to meet them. I've carried parts of my story quietly for years, not because it wasn't real, but because I wasn't ready. Today, I'm choosing to say it out loud, the way I wish someone had said it to me. I grew up in Osijek, Croatia, where summer smelled like clay courts and laundry on balconies. I was a shy kid who found rhythm in a wooden racket that was a little too big for my hands. Older players cheered for me between their rallies, and for a while, that small rectangle of red dust felt like a place the world couldn't touch. It was 1991, the year Croatia declared independence from Yugoslavia. I didn't understand politics, but I felt the change in the air. In Osijek, our streets grew quieter, and adults began speaking in whispers. Then came the shelling, distant at first, then close enough to rattle the windows. Air raid sirens broke into the nights, and curfews turned our lively neighborhood into empty, echoing street. The Yugoslav People's Army and Serbian paramilitary forces surrounded cities like mine. Schools shut down, shops ran out of bread and milk. My parents tried to make it feel normal. Games in the hallway during air raids, stories at bedtime to drown out the distant booms. But even at 8 years old, I knew we weren't safe. One evening, the air smelled faintly of smoke, like it's from somewhere burning beyond the city. My parents told me we'd only be gone for a short time. We packed one small bag each and boarded a bus to Serbia, hoping the fighting would end quickly. I pressed my face to the window, trying to memorize the streetlights. My blue bicycle stayed behind, leaning against the wall. I never saw it again. In Serbia, everything felt temporary. Beds that didn't quite belong to us. Relatives who hugged too tightly. Radio updates that made rooms go quiet. But I still practiced tennis. I hit against a wall behind an apartment block, counting softly under my breath. When we finally reached Australia, I was 11 and exhausted. Sydney felt wide and bright, maybe just too bright, for me at least. We shared a small place in Fairfield. The neighbors' accents braided together on the stairwell. Vietnamese, Arabic, Croatian, English, and I realized home might be a language you learn over time. At school, I spoke with my hands and my smile. Words lagged behind like luggage that missed the flight. On the court, though, I didn't need grammar. The sound of the ball, flip, flip, was a sentence that made sense in any country. I chased it like a moving doorway to a life that could still fit me. My dad started coaching me seriously. He believed in discipline that didn't bend much. Praise came in thin strips. Expectations came by the roll. I kept telling myself this was love translated into effort. That being shaped hard was the price of becoming someone worth watching. Some days I believed it. Some days I just got quieter. Training stretched past sunset. Forehands until my shoulders hummed. Footwork ladders that blurred into a single long line. After practice, I studied English with a dictionary that smelled like old paper and hope. I thought if I could just keep up, in sport, in school, in everything, the rest of my life would stop wobbling. When I was 16, the world noticed me for the first time. Wimbledon, first round, and somehow I beat the world #1. The crowd roared like crazy. Cameras flashed, my name rolled across the news ticker. For a split second, I believed I'd made it. But walking back to the locker room, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, because victory didn't always mean safety. At home, wins were never just wins. They were dissected, measured, and judged. Missed shots, sloppy footwork, a smile that seemed too brief in an interview. Even in my best moments, I felt like I was standing in a room waiting for the applause to end. So the real conversation could begin, and it usually wasn't kind. I started lingering in the locker room after matches, folding my clothes with unnecessary precision, tying and untying my shoes. Every extra minute I spent in that quiet space felt like armor before stepping out to face whatever waited beyond the door. Sometimes I wished the walls could speak for me, just so I wouldn't have to. On TV, I was the smiling girl with the big forehand, the teenager with composure beyond her years. In interviews, I knew exactly which phrases were safe, grateful, excited, honored. But when the lights turned off, I was just a girl lying awake in hotel rooms, replaying every point and wondering if I'd be enough tomorrow. Did you know? More than 60% of people who experience emotional harm in childhood don't speak about it until adulthood. Sometimes decades later. The silence isn't always a choice. Often it's the only form of safety they've ever known. Childhood trauma doesn't just stay in the past, it can shape how we see ourselves and the world. Many adults who grow up in high-pressure or unsafe environments develop perfectionism, people-pleasing habits, or constant self-doubt. It's not weakness, it's your mind learning to survive, and for me, that survival mode never really switched off. Well, anyway, the injuries started coming, first my wrist, then my back. Each time, I fought my way through rehab, watching my rankings slip a little further. Without tennis to fill every hour, the house felt different. Quieter, but not in a peaceful way. It was like the air was holding its breath, waiting for something I couldn't name. When retirement came, it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like a slow unraveling. One day I was an athlete with a schedule and purpose. The next, I was just me. No rankings, no headlines. And I didn't know if that version of me was worth anything without a score to prove it. I bought a cheap notebook from a corner shop. At first, I filled it with lists. Things I missed, things I didn't, places I wanted to go. But soon the words spilled into stories, pieces of memories I'd locked away. Some pages I tore out and threw away. Others I kept, even when they made my hands shake. Then I got the invitation to speak at a youth sports event. I told myself I'd stick to safe topics. Hard work, resilience, maybe a funny training story. I wasn't planning on sharing the truth. At least, not yet. But a part of me, the part that had been writing in secret, was starting to wonder if it was time. The event was in a modest gym, the kind with squeaky floors and folding chairs in neat rows. I stood on a small stage with a microphone that hummed faintly. I started with the safe stories, early training, long hours, the discipline it took. But as I scanned the room, my eyes caught a girl in the back who looked about 16, her shoulders folded in on themselves like she was trying to disappear. Something shifted in me. The words I'd rehearsed fell away, replaced by ones I hadn't planned to say. I spoke about the pressure, the fear of never being enough, the weight of expectations that never seemed to lift. My voice shook at first, but it steadied when I realized people were leaning in, listening like the air between us mattered. When it was over, I walked backstage, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. A part of me felt exposed, almost raw. I kept wondering, had I just crossed a line I couldn't step back from? Or had I finally stepped over one I was never meant to stay behind? Then the audience started leaving. Some parents stopped me, their voices low, thanking me. A few teenagers came up too, sharing small fragments of their own lives. Nothing too detailed, but enough to say, I get it. I realized then that honesty has a strange way of pulling other truths out into the open. Within days, clips from the event appeared online. Messages began arriving from people I'd never met, coaches, athletes, strangers who had nothing to do with tennis. Some wrote paragraphs about their own hidden struggles. Others just sent a single line. Thank you, I thought I was the only one. Then came the email from a publisher. They'd seen the video and wanted me to write a book. My first reaction was hesitation. Putting my story into a speech was one thing. Putting it into print felt like carving it into stone. Once it was out there, I couldn't take it back. But the thought of other people, especially younger ones, feeling alone like I once did, that weighed heavier than my fear. So I said yes. I started writing in the mornings, sometimes staring at the page for an hour before finding a sentence. Every word felt like opening a door I'd once locked shut. The book took months to finish. I didn't soften the edges or rewrite the parts that made my hands tremble. When it was finally published, the reaction was immediate. Strangers wrote to tell me I'd said things they couldn't yet say themselves. Some family members stayed silent. Others pushed back. I had expected both. What I hadn't expected was how light I felt, even with the criticism. I learned that telling your truth doesn't always bring peace, but it can bring freedom. And freedom, I realized, is its own kind of healing. Not long after, I began mentoring young athletes. It wasn't formal. sometimes just a coffee or a quiet chat after practice. I wanted them to know that their value wasn't tied to their performance, and that worth isn't something you have to earn over and over. My relationship with tennis changed too. Without the constant pressure, it became mine again. I played on local courts, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. No scoreboard, no rankings, just the thwip of the ball and the sound of my own breath. Some days I still wonder how different life might have been if I had spoken sooner. Maybe it would have saved me some years of pain. Or maybe I wasn't ready, and the timing, as hard as it was exactly what I needed to survive. Other days, I believe that every moment of silence and every sentence I've spoken since have both been part of my survival story. That it unfolded the only way it could have, even if it wasn't easy. If you've ever carried a truth alone, I hope you know you don't have to hold it forever. Your voice matters, even if it's scary at first. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. It might just help someone else find the courage to speak. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, consider subscribing.